Welcome to Dire Straits Live. I'm Tracy Clark Flory. For today's episode, I'm chatting with MAHA Battle, who is a feminist sex and dating coach. She is also the author of the brand new, just released Sexual Pleasure for Dummies. I just went to the book launch last night in San Francisco. It is an inclusive, an empathetic, and a nuanced look at the role that pleasure plays in our lives and all of the things that get in the way of pleasure in our life. You will not find any cheap tips and tricks in this book. There are no top 10 ways to please your man listicles. This is a book that is written by someone with a serious grounding in feminist analysis, who has loads of experience talking with people and couples about their sex lives. And we're going to get into all of that with MAHA today. We're going to talk about the troubles that she's seeing with straight couples in her practice, given the focus of this podcast. We will talk about how to avoid the trap of the pursuit of pleasure becoming another form of work that women disproportionately perform in hetero relationships, and so many other things. This is one of our special podcast episodes recorded live on Substack in front of a virtual audience. Hello to everyone who's joining us live right now. So these are the more casual and completely unedited versions of our pod. We're going to be releasing these lives as bonus episodes for our paid subscribers. And you can find the recordings on our Substack and on all the podcasting platforms. If you're listening to this after the fact, you'll have to upgrade to a paid subscription to hear the whole thing. It is well worth it, I think. And paid subscriptions are the only way that we're able to do this podcast. So head over to direstraitspod.com. That's straits with a GH to upgrade. With all of that, now I get to welcome you, MAHA. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Me too. So tell me a little bit about how this book came to be, because I learned at your launch event last night that actually it kind of started as a different book.
Yes. So my first book, This Is Supposed to Be Fun, is an inclusive guide to dating. And my agent and I had discussed where to go from there. In fact, when I first started working with my agent, I wanted to do a sex book only. And she was like, let's ease you in with dating and see how things go. The sex book market is really interesting, constantly evolving, like all publishing. But I think I waited to come out with a sex book for a number of reasons. But the general idea for my second book proposal was better sex. And my tagline for my business is better sex, better life. And it just felt like a really natural next step in my author career. So we were pitching it around, and Alicia Sparrow from Wiley reached out and was like, I like your voice. And I think this could be a really good For Dummies book. I think my agent maybe had an old email address of hers, and she had just come over to Wiley. So you never know who is going to be a champion of your work and where you're going to find the work. But given the fact that the For Dummies brand has been around and is so accessible to so many people, I really saw this as an opportunity to infuse feminism into the equation. And it's cool because there is such an approachable format to use. But a lot of the content itself did come from that initial book proposal.
So interesting. And you kind of like took over the mantle from Dr. Ruth, right? Like, wasn't she
Right.
doing it before you?
Well, she had written Sex for Dummies, several editions of Sex for Dummies. I don't believe she started it, but she picked it up. And the last edition was like 2019 before she passed. So, yes, I mean, the charismatic, quirky, very, very smart Dr. Ruth, we all know and love her so. And so, yeah, it also felt like a fun continuation of her work as well, kind of like
Yeah.
this book being kind of a spiritual sister. Alicia actually was like, if Sex for Dummies is the 101 book, which it really is, there's a lot of really great information there. She wanted a book that felt more like a 301. So that was also something that I took into consideration.
Right. That's where you come in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So given the focus of this podcast, Dire Straits, obviously I want to talk about the kinds of things that you've observed around pleasure in hetero relationships. What do you think are the major key things that are standing in the way of pleasure within hetero relationships? And also, how does that contrast with what you see in queer relationships?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I'll start out by kind of giving maybe an overview of what I first started seeing in my practice and then what that's evolved into, because I've been in practice for a decade, and I do think that the issues that people are facing are different now than when I first started. Um, the biggest thing that I saw at the beginning of my practice with heterosexual couples was this lack of information about differences between the sexes in terms of hormonal profile, in terms of uh, body anatomy, the what I call pleasure anatomy, and the general workings of sex, and also an inability to come together and have productive conversations around these things, because there are gendered reasons why women don't talk about their own desires, to not be seen as slutty or too lecherous,
Mhm.
and there are cultural reasons why men approach sex as if they're the experts when they're not. I think everybody should be an expert of their own body, but when it comes to partnered sex, you really have to come with a beginner's mind and a curiosity and an openness to explore. And that's not really what we're taught. So very quickly I realized, okay, there's some gendered things here, and that's my wheelhouse. I love looking at those things. It's not just one partner wants to have sex and the other one doesn't. There's like something going on there that's not being communicated. So that was a big one, and it was also an education for me. I started out and kind of launched my business in community with a lot of women here in the Bay Area who were doing holistic work. So herbalist, acupuncturist,
Mhm.
it was a really diverse group of women, and we were part of this holistic women's network, which was resource sharing, and a lot of us collaborated. We traded services. We were all young in our businesses. One woman had a bone broth company, and I was like, bone broth, and now it's like every day I drink bone broth. So anyway, that was 10 years ago. And for me, it was helpful to have a perspective that I hadn't gotten yet about bodies and systems from that
Mm.
perspective. I was able to really map that onto my work with straight couples, but it also works with queer couples. I like to say too that like most of us are dealing with the same problems. They just may have a different flavor based on orientation or gender presentation, but most people struggle with lack of confidence when
Mm.
it comes to sex, knowing themselves, knowing their bodies, being able to express that to a partner. And the biggest one is just having productive conversations about sex. It's a huge barrier to pleasure, no matter who you are, because we're not taught that skill. And that's something that I continue to see today. But the big thing that I see that is different now that I didn't see or maybe didn't clock early on is the impact of stress on relationships and sex.
Mm.
And again, I see this across orientations, but it's such a big problem. And it manifests in different ways in relationships, but the distractions that a lot of couples are contending with really impact their ability to make space in the relationship for intimacy. And when there is no emotional intimacy or very little space for that, it's very difficult to bridge that gap to
Mm.
sexual intimacy too. It's not
Mm.
that that's always a requirement for people to have sex in a partnership, but if your mode of operation is we don't tend to each other's emotional needs because we are distracted, because we're busy, because we're caregiving, because we're insert whatever reason here,
Yeah.
because the horrors of the world,
Yeah.
let's be real, that can be a huge barrier that people don't recognize. And then they internalize it as a personal failing. So
Mm.
I have to kind of enter into the relationship asking a lot of questions about where stress is, how it shows up for each partner, how they navigate that together or not. And usually, when we're able to work on strategies for communicating better through stress, figuring out how to plan for pleasure, which is a big aspect of the book, then things can happen, and they do.
Mhm. It's so
Yeah.
interesting that this stress piece is something that you've seen change over the past 10 years. Is that, and you have a great chapter on this in the book, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about the why of that? What you suspect is behind that? Is it just that, the world is going to hell and we're all feeling it, and of course it shows up in our experiences of pleasure? And also, to that point, I'm really curious, like, if you saw any impacts, like, say, from the second election of Trump in how conversations around pleasure and stuff were showing up with your clients.
Yeah. Well, I started my business in 2016. So very quickly after launching, I was getting inquiries from people who were like, I'm a sexual assault, survivor, and I am really struggling with male partnerships, period. Whether they're
Mm,
dating, they're just like, I've dealt with my things, but I am terrified of the fact that, like, we now know how pervasive this problem is.
mm,
So it was Trump, it was Me Too, it was Time's Up, it was all of these things that were primarily impacting women and their, ability to feel safe in partnership with men. And even if people didn't have a personal experience, they were still like, what are we doing here? So
yeah,
that is not something I was really trained to address,
right.
in my sex coach training. It's more, here are the issues, the common issues surrounding sex that you will see, but not really the, like, what do you do when there's this fundamental disconnect? I'm trying to express something very meaningful about my rage over this
Mm,
system that's, oppressing me and my sisters and mothers and aunties and, nieces, and my male partner is just looking at me dumbfounded or belittling my experience, or, how to basically, were a lot of questions of like, how do I have sex with that?
yeah,
At that moment, right?
yeah.
And now it's a little bit different.
Mm,
Now it's, I think, especially for the clientele that I work with, they're very active politically for the most part. Not
yeah,
everybody is, but a lot of people, if they're choosing to work with a feminist sex
yeah.
coach, I think they're kind of, more likely to be, if they're not activists, they're big readers, they're up on the news, like, they are very much aware and in their own ways are taking action. And I think at this point, there's just a lot of burnout.
Mm,
So in those early stages, it was rage. And now it's just like, I don't even want to do this.
yeah,
Whether it's
yeah.
sex with my partner, whatever the gender, or date. I'm seeing a lot more women who want partnership, but are really daunted by the prospects out there right
Mhm,
now. And
mhm.
I think that is indicative of this wave of like, okay, yeah, we've gone through a really big political shift. Men are more rightward leaning, women are tending to be more left leaning. So where's that commonality? And
Mhm.
it's not one of those things where you can really eroticize difference at this point. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
there are
Right.
fundamental things about, like, do you believe I'm a person worthy of
Right.
rights?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not sexy. Yeah.
Not sexy. Yeah.
I mean, okay, this is so interesting. I really want to talk with you about this because Amanda and I have talked about before this idea of kind of like turning to sex sometimes within perhaps a long-term committed relationship as, I mean, I think in my own words, I was talking about it like working out. That sometimes when I'm in a state of real stress and overwhelm, and like the aftermath of Trump's second election would be an example of that for me. Um, I can get into this relationship with it where it's like I don't want to do a lot of things that I truly enjoy, and sex being one of those things. Um, and so I have found at times that, this sort of like just trying to carve out the time for it, knowing that I will enjoy it because I'm with a partner that I love and trust and, all of that. But the flip of that is like the danger of course, women sort of like compelling themselves, towards sex, of feeling like it's a duty, that it's something that they have to do in order to maintain their relationship. We did a whole episode about this, about it being like another shift of work in a lot of hetero relationships where women take on the task of reading all the books and studying up and feeling like they're the ones that have to maintain pleasure within the relationship, both for themselves and for their partner. And of course, the additional pressure to often women are socialized into this like performance of pleasure for men's benefit. So how the hell do you wrestle with all of that? Because it feels so complex.
Yeah. Well, your first point makes me think about, and I do not know the sexologist who said this. I'm just going to take a stab and say it was probably Esther Perel, that,
Mhm.
sex isn't a thing you do, it's a place you go.
Mhm, mhm.
And I do really believe in the transformational properties of a sexual experience, that it can take us out of the everyday and into something fantastical,
Yeah,
otherworldly. And not to say that it has to
yeah.
be this like big production or to do, but that it is so separate from how we live the rest of our lives. And
Mhm,
that's what makes it magical. The irony of that, though, is that we have to give ourselves permission to go there. And when we are very busy, very tapped in to the needs of others, which a lot of the women that I work with are, it's hard to unplug. And then there's this sense of like, well, then that is one more thing I have to do. It's like get ready, prepare
yeah,
for, and like plan and read the books and figure out what I need to shift from go mode and do mode to like I'm actually ready and available to be transported to this place. So I think that is the tension of our modern life, is that when specifically women are tasked with so much care work, so much
mhm,
domestic labor, so much labor,
yeah.
you can't really, I mean, they're trying to push this one income household, but I'm like, who can who can live, Like that feels like such an impossibility in a lot of places in the United States. So you've got to work, you've got to care, you've got to, take care of home. And we know that male partners are not contributing in domestic sphere as much as they could be. And that impact, it is interesting because it's more than just telling men this is all that I do, because I think men are aware, right?
Mhm,
Like I do think men are aware how much
yeah,
women do. they just benefit so much from it.
Yeah.
And but a really caring partner and one who is open and willing to learn and change can accept that and also meet the moment and figure out, okay, well, how can I clear some space for you to not have to think about these things? So, yeah, it's tough. And each couple is different in how they resolve that tension. Um, yeah, I can give some examples. Like, it could look
Sure. Yeah.
like each partner allowing for a night off, meaning like we don't talk about what like we just know it's this night of the week. Let's say Wednesday night is for one partner, and then maybe Friday night. It's kind of a big night, but Friday night, let's just say, for example, is for the other partner. And it's like, we don't really discuss what the plans are. That's just their time to do with what they want. And they get to
Mm.
recharge and they get to be a person in the world,
Yeah.
and, and have that exchange. It can look like looking at the distribution of labor in the household and figuring out a literal chore wheel, that gets,
Wow. Yeah.
sorted through. It could look like having more conversations. In fact, I think that's a lot of the tension is, the do you wanna, like, is not really like a very sexy invitation for a lot of people, right? But it's like
What do you
at some point, like,
Yeah.
that's kind of a default in long-term relations. Like, do you
Yeah.
like later
So
we have some time.
what do
Do you
you tell
wanna do
people
that?
around that? Like, cause yeah, they're like what is a better way?
I mean, there's so many better ways. I mean, you can use words or you can use your body. You
Mm.
can and I do think sometimes it okay. Things get really muddied with the do you wanna, and they get muddied with the body stuff. So it really depends. Like, I really like to, because there typically is, I like to talk to the person who is the more like vocal or the more like the initiator.
Mhm.
And and kind of get a sense of what they're looking for
Mm.
when they're making these gestures. And sometimes it's not sex, sometimes it is intimacy, sometimes it is closeness.
Mhm.
But I also like to hear from the receiver who often feels like a gatekeeper to
Yeah.
sex. The like yes, no, stop, go. That
Mhm.
don't touch me here. Like I can't. That I want to know what would feel better for them. And they usually have a very clear
Mm.
instance of like, this is what worked for me in the past. This is what I liked. This is he or they or she said this particular thing that led me to believe that they were interested in sex. Some people like an overt ask. Some people like
Yeah.
something that is more subtle. Some people like a proposition for later. What I found is that a lot of people don't really flirt in between
Mhm.
sexual situations. And so bringing that back into the relationship in ways that feel safe, because maybe the text exchange where you have are you going to the grocery store later tonight? Can you pick up this? Like, isn't really the best place to put your ass looked really good in
Yeah.
those jeans this morning. I can't wait to see you later. Right. So, finding other ways, like other chat options for them to be playful with each other.
Mm.
Felt cute sending you this. No, you're at work late
Mm.
tonight. But those are things that often get missed in long term partnerships because people they don't know how to enact that kind of playfulness on an
Yeah.
ongoing basis. So, yeah, it's acknowledging so many things, that there are a lot of constraints in modern life that impact sexual desire, but then there are a lot of missed opportunities within relationships where over time certain behaviors and strategies just kind of get locked in and you
Mhm.
forget that there are other ways to say things,
Yeah.
to do things, to plan for things, to explore together.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So to the point of, women often studying up and reading all the books. I know at your event last night you mentioned Emily Nagoski's Come As You Are, and I believe you said that you had a client who kind of like had an awakening from reading that book, but it also sounded like it a little bit blew up her marriage. And you had like a very funny moment, like where you were remarking on the possibility that sometimes someone's sexual awakening also like ends the marriage. Tell me more. Like, and also,
Yeah.
are you seeing women's awakenings leading to relational fractures?
Fractures of all kinds. Yeah. Relationship fractures of all kinds.